So, really fast, let me put this down. So we have that Gettysburg Address. All right. So the Gettysburg Address, phone is away, or I get a phone. I don't want a phone. You know what's good about phones? You ought to see if you skip them down the hallway. I mean, they'll get like 5 or 6 good skips. You do it right, hit the right angle at the wall, then they just explode. All right, so Gettysburg Address on that packet though, 1 through 4, just a phrase, and then number 5, that's a short ID on a separate sheet of paper. Obviously, we'll turn that in. That's the back of the worksheet for the packet. And chapter 16. I put this out yesterday for people to grab, but it's just no packet. I thought about doing the video. The video is really good, but it skips a few things, and I just, so we're going to do that. So, anyone not grab one in this row? And let's put it this way. Anybody in this row grab one? Good. That'll make it a bit easier. Now, this one is due on the 3rd. So if you have any questions from it, you can ask on the 2nd. The Gettysburg Address has to be done on the 2nd. Sound good? I promise I will make it up to you in May for the Christmas assignment. In May, we'll do nothing after the AP exam, and nothing but wall sits, fitness, bar hangs, trench digging. Probably moat digging. We're going to do moat digging. Yeah, well, I'll talk. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the DBQ right now. Now, okay, so this is due on the 3rd, and it goes right in order. I put a few extra little things in just to make sure you address a couple of those things, but wow. Okay.
Okay. Only thing about these, do not take them out of the.
Oh, no way,
no way. Rice paper, super thin. If they break, I will kill you.
Huh?
That's it.
Well, if you leave with me, that's also the risk you take, but I'll be very gentle with them. I promise. Thank you. That's really cool. All right. So, a couple things really quick. So that's your assignment. The Gettysburg Address on the 2nd, this on the 3rd. I'll answer any questions you have. It goes right in order. Your review book has a lot of this stuff too, but the textbook is a lot better. And so let's talk very quickly about the DBQ. Oh, there are a few people gone yesterday. There were a lot of people gone yesterday. What the heck is going on here? And so Harry told me he would not be here. Now, the biggest issue on the DBQ, as I said yesterday, was the lack of outside information, the lack of facts. That was the biggest problem, lack of facts and not relating documents to facts. You got it ready right now? You got to do it. You have it? Go get paper, go in the hallway, get going. Remember this one? All right. You have to relate documents to facts. And so here's a problem that a lot of people have. So you just had, like, for example, document 7, Jefferson Davis mentions raids and attacks. It's not enough to just simply say what Davis said in there. Let's look at document 7 really quick. It says raids of organized bodies sustained by contributions of Northern society. It's talking about abolitionists. It's not enough to say, hey, there were raids. Yeah, I can read that too. When you do a DBQ, or in fact, any essay in this nature, you have to assume the person reading knows nothing, except what's in the documents. So you have to include the outside information. You don't say raids. I know we got the beat going in the background. Don't say raids, say John Brown's raid at Harvard Fair. Or raids like John Brown's raid. Okay, we dance that little bit, pay attention. I like saying things twice or three times, it starts to annoy me. So, let's say John Brown's raid. Add that additional information. It's not enough to just simply say contributions. That's contributions by abolitionists. Add that little bit of additional information outside of the document. That shows you understand the document. That's why they don't want quotes for this. Any yahoo can quote stuff. You got to take what's in the document, reinforce it with your facts, your information, and use that as evidence to prove your thesis statement. So in a regular essay, where you have topic sentence, brief explanation, then you give a couple examples of evidence, okay, you just know, you write down what you know. Here, you got to show how you can use the documents and related to your facts. And so you have to add that information. And so it's not enough. Everyone look at document 1. I had a lot of people write down something about, and they have equal right to settle with their property the territory. And their rights to hold their property will not be taken away. No, that tells me nothing. What property are they talking about? Slaves. You have to add that. Now, if you did that, great. But focus on that. That's your responsibility. Add the issue of slaves. And this is the states' rights position of John Breckinridge. Now, if you would states' right, that's great. That not only shows that you understand the document, you can relate to other information, it also shows that, or it also will give you, you have to have historical information on it. It says that in the essay, or as one of your points. I don't have it right in front of me. Yeah, historical evidence, 1 point. You have to add that. And so that is a key element here. And the other thing is this. You always have to relate it back to your thesis. Don't just summarize it. If this is the states' rights position, slavery can be brought anywhere. A free soil president is anathema, is to a states' rights position. It is the exact opposite of what states' rights wants. So you have to prove that this, okay, so when a free soil man is elected president, they seceded from the Union. And one more big thing I didn't tell yet, or I said yesterday, but I want to be clear on this. You have to have something on the election of 1860. Not just because that was the trigger of Civil War. That led directly to secession. It was 1860. And not just mention it. You got to talk about the election. Southern Democrats, Northern Democrats. Democrats were split. There's another candidate, John C. Bell. Stephen Douglas wanted popular sovereignty. Breckinridge wanted states' rights and just the spread of slavery. And that allowed Lincoln to be elected. And it's really important, that election. When the Republicans won, that's terrified Southerners that the Republicans might create a Republican Party in the South, and that they cannot allow. That terrified them, almost as much as slavery in the territories, almost as much as congressional imbalance. Not quite slave rebellion fear, but that is key. In fact, the two big areas that I would have put down for my paragraphs, if I was doing, I'm just thinking purely because the documents all relate to this, would be slavery in the territories and election of 1860. And if you talk about slavery in the territories, you have to mention like seen in the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which led to popular sovereignty and bleeding Kansas. Or at least compromise of 1850 and popular sovereignty. More information. Or Dred Scott. You need that outside information. Okay. So I just want to make sure I got those things in. So if you look at this, I photocopied a couple of examples. This is good context, lots of good background material. In your opening paragraph, I don't want a summary of what you're going to write in your body paragraphs. That's why you have body paragraphs. Give you background material. So it has industrial revolution, abolishing slavery, a lot of stuff. This is very good. And by the way, I got to be clear about my writing of good can be interpreted as either, if I understand now, I've got shovel and soup. So if you see soup, that means you did a good job and I want soup that I eat with a shovel. And so, good debate, they take a stand on the statement, and then 1860 and the ideology of states' rights, which I thought very good. Lots of references to it. And there's going right to 1860. The only problem I want to put down here is order. Might have been better to have the ideology first and then the election of 1860, but other than that, good document. Here's outside information referring to Dred Scott, because the Republican Party was furious at the Dred Scott decision, which said slaves could ride anyone that say no slavery in the territories. So that's a really good example. Here's a really good outline, background material. It's very well organized. I just photocopied. I had some really good ones, and some of them are really close. Here's another one. And I really like this one because it relates directly on here, document the facts, and this shows explaining with a hat. She wrote down explain. And I also joined Dead Calhoun, so I enjoyed that one too. Here's one more, same deal, documents the facts, document 7 directly related here. This is her shorthand, good brainstorm list. And then, as a gift for all of you, here's a few documents just to see, and there's mine. And a paragraph. So I put that up there, and that is on Teams, which is basically DBQ sample Civil War. As if you want to take a quick peek at that. But most of it did really good. But the big thing is, if I couldn't really understand where you're going, if I didn't think you answered the question, then you start losing things. You don't have facts. If you just say, raise or about property and don't add the additional facts, I don't know if you don't know it or just forgot and weren't sure. So you have to add facts. Get information as much as possible. So the basic outline of a body paragraph, I left this on the board. I left this on the board for 3 days last week. The topic sentence, quick summary, the 2 bits of evidence, documents. One of them was have. So you need additional sentence. And then the last sentence would be, how does this or why does this reinforce your thesis? Why it's important. But I thought they were pretty good. I just wanted to make sure I got through those points. That's why I was being kind of harsh. I wanted to make sure I got through them. If I put down OI, that's outside information. That's from the color code. OI, I'm not doing computer programming. EX is explanation. All right, so if you got 85 or less than 85 after the break, because I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I know. I'm leaving the country. Secret mission, the world's heavy safety game. It gets a little tiresome. What do you guys do without me? I mean, I wish you luck. If you get less than 85, if you go back and look through it, I will give you a chance to do a part of it for a few extra points. Just so I want to make sure we get we did get a paragraph right or something like that. And so you see me right when we get back, okay? Huh? I can't tell you. I don't want people to follow me. I know how shady bear. I do like the shirt. Okay. Any questions? So right after we get back on the second, ask me. We'll talk about something you can do, okay? So you have a chance to think about it. All right. So let's go take your notes out, and let's go ahead and finish things up. It was so good it made me sad. So we have good, sad soup with a shovel. I'm guessing on that. You didn't have context. But you went to the doctor. The picture was fantastic. The picture was really good. That kind of changed my life. So if I put EX, that means you don't have enough outside information. All right. So let's go and do your notes then. Gettysburg Address, a great speech. It's shocking how short the Gettysburg Address is. All righty then. All right, first off, a couple things I'll tell you real quick. Here's Stonewall Jackson's grave after he died. This is about 16 years ago. I've not been there for about 16 years. Lost causers, those who still want the Confederacy to win, which should tell you a lot about them. They still decorate this grave, and there's Confederate battle flags all the time on it. To this day, that happens. That was just when I just happened to go. And the other thing I thought was interesting, they did bury in its mark his arm. They have a grave for his arm. In case you're wondering. And I'll show you one more thing. Remember I mentioned that 1st Minnesota Regiment, that bayonet charge? The video said 80% down. That's the statue. It's really cool. And, you know, and each state, you're very proud of their contribution. And that's walking down the little trail, little round top. And it is beautiful. And that's the Warren statue. I made a little boy cry. And probably mother too. Moving on. That is the 28th Ohio. That's the regiment my great-great-great-grandfather fought in. That's on Culp's Hill. And so I went there with my dad, my brother, and his son, so my nephew. And this was, I don't know how many years ago, but I got a pic. I'll show it. There they did it. That's me and my dad and my brother and my nephew. My nephew then was, what, 15? Now he is in graduate school, so it gives you an idea of the time. But that's me. I'm in a t-shirt. Okay, that's all I wear. So, 1864, this is the key year. 63, 62, the war changed. 63, all these amazing battles. 64 now, the war will finally be decided, even though it won't until 65. The blue is vaguely where the Union Army is. It isn't quite this wide on the Mississippi. You see much of Tennessee now is in the control of the Union Army. And Lincoln is already trying to create a new government for Tennessee to show that we're winning the war. Also, they broke off a piece of Virginia and named it West Virginia. That's where it was a Union state. And the big thing is Lincoln is thinking, who picks the president in the United States? It's not the voters. Who picks it? The Electoral College. And that is going to be another 4 electors for Lincoln, he's hoping. So that's why he created the state. He did the same thing with Nevada. They created Nevada. So there'd be 3 more electoral votes for Lincoln. They just, boom, quick credit. So there's no one really lived in Nevada. They made it. And, oh, one more thing. There was a battle here in at the end of 1862 and 1863 at this place in Arkansas called Helena. Moving on. I'm just throwing that out there. And yes, it was Helena. What is that? Is that review game?
Yeah.
It's like somebody, that must be all they do. So, in 1864, the South, Jefferson Davis was still president, and his goal basically to hold out to the election in the North. Hold out to the election in the North. And Davis is a weakness. Davis cannot persuade the states. Davis cannot persuade politicians. He was dictatorial, could not stomach people who disagreed with him. And I should add, Davis, everyone thought would be such a great president. They just assumed because, you know, the silly belief that because he went to West Point, he could lead men. No, that's not the way government works. To get things done, you have to persuade. You have to convince. You might have to compromise.
Being in the military does not give you that skill. Doesn't mean you don't have that skill, but that doesn't come from the military. And also, well, not necessarily, Eisenhower was very compromising. That's another story. And it turned out to be a disaster. And especially when you have states that all say, we're here for states' rights. North Carolina and Georgia were infamous for not sending the proper amount of troops. In fact, the vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens from Georgia, he refused to go to Richmond and hung out in his hometown in Macon, Georgia. North Carolina sent very few troops, and their troops were infamous for running away during the battle. Now, that's probably exaggerated, but other states' units used to make fun of North Carolina soldiers. And they would say the only way you would get a North Carolina soldier to stand and fight is if you put tar on their heels so they stick and fight, otherwise they run. Now, North Carolina would take that and turn it around and say, no, we never ran like we had tar heels. And that's where they become the Tar Heel state. And they had massive inflation. They had no tax structure, no money that people trusted, no central bank. There's one note right there. By 1864, prices were doubling almost every day. In fact, money was worthless. So they had what's close to hyperinflation. If you can't tax. Now, I actually have, Andre, you got those in, 2 examples of Confederate money. And they're made on rice paper. Because it's really, really cheap. And they would crumble in a second. So we are not taking them out of their packages. Here's a $10 one, and here's a $20 one. You know why these survived? Because they were so small with all the inflation, no one used them. They soon had $1 million notes because they had so much inflation, the price is doubling every day. Just like when I was a little kid, quarters, dimes, nickels were used all the time. Now, how often are they used now? You still use them, but very rarely. They don't buy much. What will a dime buy you? That used to buy me 4 loaves of bread, 3 pounds of meat, and a gallon of milk when I was a kid. I'm blind. But you could buy, for a quarter, you could buy a candy bar. For a dime, you could buy a candy bar when I was a little kid. Okay, next question. Student fourth period. Oh, you do? Yeah. He also had, these are Union ones. So yeah, they're on rice paper, not touch. I mean, they're really pretty. I'll let you come up, take a look at them, walk up here in a sec. So let's do the North real fast too. The North, actually the Republic. So you have a 5 and a 10 too. Things. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where we are. Oh, okay, so 3 big laws would pass. The Homestead Act, the Morrill Act, and Transcontinental Railroad Act. So the Homestead Act, we'll get to a little bit later, talk about 160 acres given to them, taken from American Indians. Transcontinental Railroad paid for the Transcontinental Railroad. Morrill Act would create land-grant colleges. So money from the sale of government land stolen from American Indians. Got to add that. Remember, they're going to take it from the people who live there. But that would pay for colleges. And specifically one college, which would be the agricultural school in each state. What school is it? That? Which one? No. Usually, almost always, it's the state university. So Montana State University, Washington State University, Idaho State University, that's the land-grant college. But actually, it used to be Montana State College, and UM used to be Montana State University 100 years ago. There's a tidbit that you can use for the rest of your life. And the United States also had huge debt. And yes, the US would issue the bonds, but the United States government could tax. They could tax. If you can tax, you don't have to pay as much interest and you don't have as much inflation. But yes, there's going to be a huge amount of inflation too. Think about it. no one's going to be making consumer goods. The US government's going to be buying everything like food, clothing, and so everything's going to go up in price. Wars always have inflation. We saw elements of that here by shortages just on the periphery when Russia invaded Ukraine, and Ukraine produces about 20% of the wheat in the world. And all of a sudden that wheat was cut off. What happened to the price of food? Worldwide, it will go up. So, also the United States passed the Legal Tender Act. The Legal Tender Act went away from this loose affiliation, gold and silver to dollars, which eventually will become known as the gold standard, and just said the United States will issue currency backed up by our ability to pay taxes, which is what currency is today, called greenbacks. And the greenbacks were different than the old, almost like gold certificates. And to make them different, they found a cheap ink. Green was cheap, and so they were green. And to this day, that's why dollars at least partially green. When I was your age, currency was more green. You notice how today, like you get a 20, there's some different colors and it's more white, and that's to stop counterfeits. So they've changed it a little bit. They made it more variety of colors. And Copperheads were pro-Confederate. They called themselves Peace Democrats. Everyone got that? So they were Peace Democrats and or pro-South Democrats. There were War Democrats who were for finishing the war. Everyone got that? They were Copperheads. And what they would do, I have a penny from this era. But they would put a penny. Pennies were made out of copper back then, and they were called Indian head pennies. And they put a penny on the lapel to show that they're Peace Democrats. Well, Republicans would turn that around and say, well, they're actually like snakes, aka Copperheads. That's where the term comes from. What are pennies made out of today? Magic. Zinc. Yeah, there's more than a penny's worth of zinc in each one. Clement Vallandigham was a Democratic congressman from Ohio. He'd be one of the leaders of the Copperheads. And he would be so anti-union that eventually, Lincoln would exile him and send him to the South. Just kick him out. And the South at first was like, yes, the North is falling apart. Their politicians are coming here. Well, he was so annoying that they exiled him too to Canada. And then he just kind of came back across Lake Erie and showed up in Ohio with a little war. And Lincoln just very cleverly ignored him then. Who cares? He's done. I think it's just really funny that we kicked him out to the South and the South kicked him to Canada. In Canada, it's like, but they're very polite about it. And so in 1864, Lincoln finally made the big decision. He made Ulysses S. Grant the overall commander of all Union forces, of all of them. This was March of 1864. So first time they ever met. Ulysses S. Grant showed up. Now, when Grant went to West Point, his actual name is not Ulysses S. Grant. His name was Hiram Ulysses Grant. But for some reason, when they were checking them in, his name was written as Ulysses, then S. Grant. And he stuck. He left it. Now, maybe he never really liked the name Hiram. And he went by Sam. Everyone called him Sam. And there's another reason, too. So every cadet, when they go to West Point, they get a chest, a foot locker. It's a big chest. And they will stencil in or carve in their names, etch in their names. Their initials for their names. And think about it. Ulysses S. Grant, U.S.G. You got U.S. Now, what would his initials be for his other name? Hug. He didn't want Hug for Hug. So he went with U.S. Grant. And for the rest of his life. And the S stands for S, because they just wrote an S down. The United States is going to have 2 presidents with the letter S as their middle name. Just the S.
Anybody know who else the other one is? He would win on his own account in 48, but he was Roosevelt's vice president, Harry S. Truman. Just S.
Oh, he's maybe named after him. That I don't know. And his goal, and he knew it, he had to win the war by the election of 64. Or not win, but make it look like the North is going to win. That's a great photograph. It shows Grant with his portrait, shows him getting his portrait taken and see that holding his head still because of the camera would shake. And it shows a lot about Grant. He hated wearing his army or his general's uniform. He always wore a private's tunic. He always seems big and burly to me. He wasn't all that big. I guess he was a master horseman. He also couldn't stand the sight of blood. When he would have a steak cooked, it had to be charcoal, which is really interesting considering what's going to come in the next year. He was a very talented and underrated general. And so, that's Grant. And so his main plan, it's a 5-pronged strategy. But the 2 main armies in the West, his most trusted lieutenant and one of the best U.S. generals of all time, William Tecumseh Sherman, will lead the Grand Army. It's actually 3 different armies, from Chattanooga to Atlanta, but the big thing is destroy the army there. And then the Army of the Potomac under Meade will take Richmond. But the big thing is destroy Lee's army. That's the goal. Grant had very good reason to trust Sherman, so Sherman was on his own. Grant knew Meade was a very able general, but cautious, and he also knew this was the most important theater. So Lee's headquarters went with Meade. And so the best way to look at it is they co-commanded. Grant made the overall big decisions, Meade ran the army. So a lot of times you see this as Lee, General Lee versus General Grant. It's much more complex than this. But there's also other attacks. Try to get Mobile, Shenandoah Valley, and threaten Richmond from the south. Those other ones failed. But the only ones that matter here and here. And so, let's get very quickly to the Eastern Theater and General Meade. You want to hear a story first? I told you I would tell you a story about Shiloh. So let me tell you the story about Shiloh really quick. I want to make sure I have time to tell. It's a good story. And Shiloh, so remember that's the battle in April 1862. I didn't tell you because I wanted to make sure it got set to the video, but it's right here. And Grant's army was surprised, and the Confederates almost won, but they were so confused and tired they didn't win. I mean, this was the battle that Confederates think we had a chance. Like, that is so close. And it's in the South. Gettysburg, they talk about taking a charge, but that's in the North, that's up here. And a clear, decisive U.S. victory. Shiloh? Almost. And so when I was there, and this is getting near 20 years ago, not quite. This must be what, 2004, 2005? My wife and I went down there, and this was spring break. So think about first week of April. So we went down to New Orleans, then went through Vicksburg, and came up here. Really fun trip. And actually, it was so nice because it was warm. But we just happened to be at Shiloh near the anniversary of the battle. And the next day, they were going to have this massive reenactment and all kinds of exhibits. And they're going to do like fire off cannon and show all kinds of stuff. It really sounded like an amazing thing for the anniversary of the battle. And so we decided we're going to stay one more day. We're going to go the next day. And it blew us away. There were probably 25,000 people there. And it was unreal how many people. In fact, the battlefield is huge. We had to park about 5 miles away. And then they had buses shuttling people because there's so many people. And inside the massive parking lot was open to exhibitions, they had a band. They had all these reenactors, and reenactors were pretty funny. They dressed totally up in the garb of Confederate, mostly Confederate, they're all Southerners. And a few Northerners. It's also funny seeing men in their middle age, and some are a little bit overweight. But that's the way life is. You get a little bigger, but they're all trying to represent Southern soldiers who were like scarecrows because they were so skinny without food. But you know, what the heck. And there's also something else. It was just weird. We had been in New Orleans all the way up, and you're in the South. And I don't know this, but other parts of the country happen to be more diverse than Helena. I don't know if you know that. Helena, yeah, I know that shocks you because it seems like the cosmopolitan center of the world. In fact, that's one of the things I love about traveling. It's going to places where you see all the variety of different cultures and people. I love that. But when we got to Shiloh, it was just different. Like I felt like I'm in eastern Montana. But that's another, I'll get to that in a second. But there are all these people there, and it's really pretty amazing. It's fun, we're having a good time. Nice, warm spring day. And there's a little bandstand, they're playing Civil War songs. They had like a couple guitars and a violin, a few things. They're playing these songs. I like that. I like Civil War era music. So we sat and listened with, there was like 1,000 people listening. Just shoulder to shoulder, listening to this. And they're just playing songs, and I was watching, and I got done with the song, and they said, we're here to remember, the singer went over the microphone, we're here to remember one of the biggest battles, the Civil War. Now he had a southern accent, from the South, whatever. And of biggest battles of the Civil War. And everybody around us started to boo. Are we booing that statement? And then he goes, no. I mean, we're here to remember one of the biggest battles of the war between the states. And they all started to cheer. Yeah! Now, the war between the states would start to be used about 20 or 30 years after the war as part of the lost cause. Like this Confederacy was fighting a noble fight for freedom. Nobody called it the war between the states during the Civil War. Nobody did. The war between the states. And like, yeah! And then he goes, no, I mean the war of northern aggression. And the people are like, yeah! That's when I noticed the guy in front of me, the two guys in front of me. One guy, both, there were Confederate battle flags, I'm sure it was Confederate battle flags. And it said, heritage, not hate. And the other one was a picture of Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, and it said, we have not forgotten. That's the first time I noticed that. And then the guy said, no, I mean the war of northern arrogance. And people started hugging and high-fiving, and my wife whispers to me, she goes, I think we're the enemy. And also the other thing was, this was the first time I've been to the South where everybody was white. It wasn't like that anyplace else because there were people of all kinds. Here, no. It was noticeable. Like, that's what was different. And it was like, yeah, that's really interesting. Just because you're in the South, there are people, heck, you're in the South now. I mean, there's people from all over from different cultures all over the world. It's a very cosmopolitan place. It was just different then. So I got uncomfortable. And so I turned around and started walking. Now, like I said, I wear t-shirts all the time. I like to wear old t-shirts of like old, like minor league baseball teams, like their old logos, or old football teams. I like those. You know, I just think they're cool. So that's what I wear all the time. And I was wearing one of NFL team, but it was the old NFL team. Today they're the Arizona Cardinals, and I'm not a fan of them. I just like the shirt. But back in the 1940s and 1950s, they were the Chicago Cardinals. So it was Chicago Cardinals, a northern town. I didn't even think about it. I just put on a t-shirt. So I turned around and started walking out, and I kind of got through, and then I'm kind of looking back. So, you know, imagine me kind of looking back, and I could feel like somebody in front of me. And there were 3 guys. And they're all like, looking up at me, because they're all about that tall. Like this, and I was just like, there they were. And I thought, oh, am I going to fight 3 guys? But the guy looks at me, the guy in the middle. He looks just furious. He said, you a Yankee? I'm like, what? It just so surprised me. He goes, no, are you a Yankee? And I said, first thing that popped in my head, I'm from Montana. And I could tell, no idea where Montana was. It could have been Canada, you know. It just no idea. And he said, no, are you a Yankee? And he was just coming out of his mouth. And I said, we weren't a state yet. You know, I didn't know what else to say. We weren't a state yet. And he just goes, yeah, and then walks away. So that was my experience at Shiloh, where I realized there are some people who have not realized the war has ended. Now, the day before, amazing. The first part, really fun. That really took me for a loop. I knew there were people like this. And they're still around. And you can still see a lot of political rallies today where there's a lot of Confederate battle flags being waved. If you would have saw the January 6th insurrection in 2021, there were Confederate battle flags all over. And American flags. Okay, so let's get to the Eastern Theater then really fast. Oh, one more thing I'll tell you about this, almost forgot. So the United States, let me tell you right now, Lee had about 60,000 men, but they had the draft even earlier than the North did. They've been doing the conscription, and they couldn't find soldiers. They were younger and younger. They went from 18 to 17, and soon they're allowing 16-year-olds in. And men as old as 40 and up to 45 are fighting in the war. They are literally scraping the bottom of the barrels. And there would be a lot of Confederates who would dodge the draft and run away, even though they were pro-South. You just leave. They would go west, try to get rich. They were draft dodgers, but they got out. For example, there was these 4 guys from Georgia who just happened to be in this place called Montana, and they were draft dodgers, and they just happened to come across this little creek. You might have heard of it. It was their last chance for gold. Yeah, the 4 Georgians were draft dodgers, but they were Confederates. And Helena, there was that big battle I mentioned. That was in their mind. And that's why we're called Helena. Helena has a really Confederate town. I live 1 block away from a street named Breckenridge, named after John C. Breckenridge. I live 2 blocks away from a street called Davis, named after Jefferson Davis. There are Confederate references all over. And in the peak of the Lost Cause and the return of the Ku Klux Klan in 1913, 1914, which I'll tell you about right after the break, a Confederate monument was built in Helena, the furthest north Confederate monument in the United States. Did you know about that monument? Because it was removed 3 years ago from Women's Park. Helena has an interesting history. So let's get to the Eastern Theater really quick for the bell ring. Last few minutes. So, Meade, now a little bit over 100,000 men. Grant is riding with them. General Halleck, who was in command of the Army, now like his chief of staff running the operations in Washington, D.C., which he was perfect for. So, Meade was ordered by Grant to get through the forest, the same forest as the Battle of Chancellorsville, meaning the wilderness. Get through as quickly as possible, get to open territory here. Lee, once he realized he was marching knew he could not allow this. So he attacked the marching Union forces trying to get through the forest. And this would be one of the most confusing and awful battles of war, cleverly called the Battle of the Wilderness. And it actually went on for a few days, but what the heck? Oh, okay. It went on for a few days around this era, but we always just put down the 5th. That was the heaviest fighting. It was really confusing. In the forest, it's really heavily forested. There's mountains. Neither side could see the enemy. This was an awful fight. It's one of those that would have been, it'd be better known if not for the fact of what's going to come right afterwards. And basically, there'd be 2 big parts of the battle where Confederate forces almost broke through the charging Union forces, or the advancing Union forces, and Union forces almost broke through Confederate forces. Both sides, after a horrible day of fighting, would dig trenches, and some of them had no idea, but they dug into the graves of the hastily dug dead after the Battle of Chancellorsville. Gives you an idea how they fought right on top of each other. Can't even imagine how awful that must have been. And one of the worst parts of this battle is after the 5th, the horrible fighting, in between the lines, a forest fire started. And thousands of wounded men were caught in that fire. Most they were able to find, here they are trying to bring them out. That's sketch, but a lot of them, they just heard the screams and they couldn't do anything. That's what men would remember their nightmares about the Battle of the Wilderness. When the battle was over, there'd be almost 30,000 casualties, 18,000 of them Union. Doesn't that sound like another Confederate victory? Well, 11,000 Confederate casualties, they can't lose those men. And one more big thing for the bell rings, I have to get one more thing, two more things, actually. When the battle ended, here's where the lines were. Meade ordered his men to begin to retreat. Most of the time, they would turn north and go back to the camp. Most of the time. And so, when the first men of Sedgwick's corps started marching down the Orange Turnpike, and when they got to this crossroads, they knew if they turned this way, they're going back north into camp, there won't be another battle for 2 or 3 months. But if they turn right, that means they're going south. And what does that mean the next day or the day after? More fighting. When they got there that night, somebody from Meade's staff, they're trying to be quiet. He turned, get my directions right here, we're going to face it this way. So he went, meaning go south. And everybody knew go south means more death, maybe worse than the Wilderness. And what did the men of Sedgwick's corps do when they ordered them south into more fighting? They started to cheer. Huzzah! Using the Union, using the Northern cheer. Huzzah! They were overjoyed. We're going to win the war. Finally, we're going to end this thing. We're not going to go back to the camp and fight two more months. They didn't know what to think of Grant as overall commander, but they realized one thing. Grant is going to win. And now there's a race to the next road junction between the Union forces and the Confederate forces. And the next road junction is a little place called Spotsylvania. And what's the worst part about Spotsylvania? Yeah, blood-sucking vampires. And what side are the vampires on? No sides. Vampires know no loyalty. Do not trust vampires. Does everybody have their assignment for, I know I got to give you a little Christmas assignment, we're good on that? The second for Gettysburg, the third for the notes, I'll answer any questions. Yeah. Hold on to it. Oh, so I'm going to leave these right here. This is 2 Confederate dollars. So you can go and get up right now if you want to take a look at this. And then right next to it is, this is a token. It's not really a coin, but it's used kind of a memento. And then this is a 25-cent a quarter. So if you want to look at these, you can have Stevens on them. I'll let you peek out if you want. They're really cool.
Can you just specific notes to yourself and have us live on the last day of the Loma?
I'll try that. Yeah, the map is that last page of that packet. So get it to me and get to me with the first day. I do? What did you get? Let me look at it. No, yeah, 20 not. Yeah, you have it. So that's just
Same here.
no, we're not. It's the council. The council doing the presentation.
Oh, okay.
So there might be something else. Then I'll test you.
Have fun. Oh, yeah, have
By the way,
have fun on your secret mission.
I'm going to Costa Rica.
That's so
I did
nice.
something.
To look at it like that.
Yes.
Remember.
That's
That'll be fun.
My wife and I are gonna have fun, yeah. Yeah.
So, we won't destroy it. What would that look like?
I would have you do like another paragraph. So just ask me when we get back and I'll let you.
Okay.
Today's the last day of limbo.
I know, but I want to show everyone the money. I gotta put them very carefully away.
Well, I didn't see.
Yeah, these are really cool.
No.
Be very gentle.
No.
What?
Yeah, money just became worthless in the Confederacy. Hyperinflation, if you can't tax.
Who knew
What are the
if you
faces
just
on it?
throw together a nation?
One's Alexander Stevens, I can't remember who the other one is.
Are we gonna do limbo or not?
I'm doing this for general oversight.
I lost it here.
I don't know what